Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for your patience. My name is Melissa Bauer, and I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Sustainability Programs at the Pet Sustainability Coalition. I am so legitimately geeked out excited for our conversation this morning. So thank you so much for joining us. A quick bit of housekeeping, just so you know, microphones and cameras are turned off and will be for the duration of this call. However, the Q&A is live, it is functioning. So you all have that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and that's where we'll be taking questions for our speakers and our panelists today. So feel free to be dropping those questions in at any time. We also have the chat feature active with the PSC team monitoring, and we'd love it if you would introduce yourself and let us know where you're calling in from today. The last bit of housekeeping is that recording and slides will be sent to everyone who registered for today's call. So if you are unfamiliar with the Pet Sustainability Coalition, let me give you a brief introduction. We are a nonprofit industry association that works with over 200 companies in the pet industry throughout the supply chain, all the way from suppliers and manufacturers, brands, distributors, retailers, and the like. And we're also a global organization. So we have 60% of our membership here in North America, another 30% in Europe and the EU. And we're actually growing really fast in Australia and Asia as well. And we serve a dual purpose. So we work with our individual 200 plus members to help them measure, celebrate, and improve their sustainability performance for what it means to them. But we also work to bring the industry together to solve large scale issues that are too big for any one pet company or any one sector of the pet industry to tackle on its own. So those strategic initiatives that we're currently focused on are strategic proteins, sustainable packaging, and diversity, equity, inclusion. And our talk today, one of the reasons I'm so excited about it is it really kind of fills that dual mission just like us. So if you have not explored the PSC website and the PSC resources that are available to you, we have a toolkit with dozens of resources that help our members and the industry at large work on a wide variety of sustainability topics. And one of those parts of the toolkit is on culture engagement, which has a large amount of resources to help with employee engagement and engage employee in general programs. But we also are adding a seventh section to that toolkit very soon on diversity, equity, inclusion, where we're going to be really excited to have some of the resources we talk about today. But also that looking at that broader diversity, equity, and inclusion movement and being a part of that, this topic is definitely relevant to that. So I'm so excited to introduce you to today's speakers who have significantly more interesting things to talk about than I do. So first, we're going to hear from Andrew and Jeanette. Andrew is the president and CEO of Defy Ventures, and Jeanette is the directors of Defy Ventures in the tri-state area. So Andrew and Jeanette, welcome. And we're also going to be hearing from Stuart Chanley from Earth Animal in a little bit. But Jeanette and Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us. So as mentioned, my name is Andrew Glazier. I'm president and CEO here at Defy Ventures. And I'll let Jeanette introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us. I am Jeanette Pinero. I am the director of the Tri-State Chapter. So leading everything in terms of programming that we're doing out here in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey.
And I'm coming to you from Los Angeles. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get going with a presentation. Actually, I have to share my screen first and then hit the present button. Okay. All right. Good. Everybody can see my screen, I hope. All right. So Defy is a national nonprofit organization. We've been around for about 12 years, and we're currently running in 8 states, soon to be 9. We're soon to announce a new affiliate in Louisiana. And we have been programming our entrepreneurship, personal development, and career readiness programming across the country for about 12 years. So our vision is to cut recidivism in half by leveraging entrepreneurship to increase economic opportunity and transform lives. And our mission is to change mindsets to give people with criminal histories their best shot at a second chance. And when we talk about changing mindsets, we're not just talking about the people we serve who are currently and formerly incarcerated adults. We're also talking about people like you, people in the business community who, if we're going to address the issue of mass incarceration, have to be part of the solution, because what we know is that if people cannot get employed, they will go back to prison. And right now, the recidivism rate, that return to prison rate, is about up to 70% in the United States. So if we can't change the mindsets of people in society, particularly in the business community, to think about ideas of hiring, right, and about their ideas about what goes on and who's in the criminal justice system, we'll never solve this problem. I want to tell you a story about one of our entrepreneurs in training. We call them EITs. Those are the people in our program. His name is Timothy. He's in San Diego. Timothy did our program while he was incarcerated. He did a 12-year sentence in moderate security prison. And he had been involved with gangs. And while he was inside, he made the decision that he wanted to be different. And he started this process of transformation. He went to school. He got a certificate in custodial cleaning. And then he found Defy Ventures. And at Defy, he went through our 7-month intensive program, 1,200 pages of curriculum, and he worked through this to develop his business idea, which was quality touch cleaning. And we had mentors come in, volunteers, to support him in the development of his business. And he came out of prison and he started working on it. And he did start working on his business, but he also worked with one of our volunteers and ended up getting employed. And so when he did, while he was running his business on the side, he started working for a biotech startup in the San Diego area. And they brought him in with his experience to actually help them create their own inside custodial program. And recently he was just promoted to a new position. He now has equity in the company, and he's full-time employed, and he's doing great. And he's an incredibly valued member of that company, and a great contributor. Anybody who had met Timothy, years before, if you met in prison, right? If you didn't know better, you might think, oh, this is a guy, he's in prison, and he did something bad enough to get 12 years, right? There's a lot of fear there and a lot of emotion about that, right? But when given an opportunity and a fair chance, Timothy was able to be really successful. So we asked people who are coming to Defy and learning about Defy and learning about the justice system, what if you were only known for the worst thing you've ever done? So just take a minute, think about the worst thing you've ever done. And what if that was all you were known for? You walked into a job interview, you walked into a room, you walked in to get housing, and all anybody saw in you was the worst thing you had ever done. That is what you were known. That's all you were known for. And think about what your life might be like. Well, if you're coming out of the criminal justice system, and that is on a background check statement, that is what you're known for. That's on the internet, right? And so you are judged for that no matter what you've done to transform or change your life or be a different person. And consider if that thing you had done was when you were 18 or 19. And the thing is that for people in the justice system, by the age of 23, 30% of Americans have a criminal history, right? And if you are a Black man, 40% of Black men have a criminal history. So that's a lot of people that we are preparing to write off because of something they might have done, in many cases, when they were pretty young. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeanette to tell you a little bit more about the program.
Thanks, Andrew. And thanks for sharing that story about Timothy, because I think, I'm going to talk a little bit about impact and throw some numbers at you, but I think that story really helps to provide some context on, what our program really does. Just to, again, talk a little bit about some of the impact that we've had since we were founded in 2010. In terms of our volunteer base, Andrew talked about engaging, the business community and executive volunteers to join us in our mission. We have engaged close to 6,000 of those volunteers. We've done programs programming in 16 prisons. Nationally, we have engaged over 5,000 of our EITs, our entrepreneurs in training, in our in-prison program, and over 500 of them in our post-release program as well. And we've helped incubate over 140 businesses. We're going to talk a bit about employment and recidivism as well. And here at Defy, our employment rate is 84%, and our one-year recidivism rate is less than 8%. And so we'll show a little bit more, but that really shows the impact for those people who are really coming home and looking for that stability in their lives, looking for that employment and that support and help, so that way they do not recidivate and do not go back to prison. Andrew, can you go to the next slide? Great, thanks. So a little bit on our program. So we have what we call an inside-outside model for our program. So we start inside in a prison facility, and we have an in-prison program called CEO of Your New Life. That is about a 7 to 9 month program, and it really focuses on these 4 core topics. So we focus on entrepreneurship, employment or career readiness, personal development work, which we think is crucial in talking about any professional growth amongst the EITs. And we also focus on reentry preparation. So throughout those 7 to 9 months, our EITs are completing curriculum, and they are working on developing a resume. We have volunteers coming in that are coming in for coaching events, and they are providing feedback for the EITs on their resume, on what we call a personal development statement, which helps EITs talk about their background and their experiences. And they're also providing feedback on their business ideas as well. And one of the culminating events that we have for this in-prison program is a graduation where the EITs actually receive a certificate of entrepreneurship from the Drucker School of Management. But we also have a Shark Tank style business pitch competition in which our volunteers are coming in, they're providing that feedback as well. And our EITs are getting it in front of crowds of 80 to 100 of their peers and other volunteers, their family members, and they're learning these skills through entrepreneurship that will help develop and grow them as a professional as well when they are released. We can go to the post-release program. So our post-release program has 2 different pathways. We are really looking to serve people who are coming home from our in-prison program in our career reentry pathway. And so in this pathway, we want to focus on reentry stability. So when someone comes home, we actually don't even necessarily tackle entrepreneurship yet. We want to make sure that a person who's coming home is able to just create a foundation for themselves that will lead to their success. And so we focus on making sure that they're connected to employer partners that we may have, that they have job opportunities. Again, we are having volunteers and staff reviewing their resumes, doing mock interviews with them. We are providing leadership and soft skills workshops for them. We're also focusing on financial literacy and making sure that they are having their LinkedIn profile, for example, updated. And so the first 6 months when someone comes home, we're making sure that they are gaining that stability in their reentry that they need in order to continue down a successful path. If somebody has gained that reentry stability and they are now interested in actually pursuing this business idea that they started, they can go down our entrepreneurship pathway. And so our entrepreneurship pathway has 2 different programs in it. One is our bootcamp program that is mainly focused on individuals who have not done our in-prison program. It is a 14-week intensive program that focuses on the basics of entrepreneurship and really developing a viable business idea. And then we have our business accelerator program. And so our business accelerator program is focusing on having an EIT really launch and scale their viable business idea. So they are being paired with a mentor, again, another way for our business volunteers to engage with Defy. They are acting as a mentor, acting as a coach, attending these coaching and feedback events that we have. Our EITs are going through curriculum that will ultimately help them develop a full business plan and financial model for their business. And then by the end of that, they do have the opportunity to pitch, if they have a scalable business, to pitch in front of an investment committee for some seed funding as well. So this program, can take anywhere from a year to a year and a half, but this is really where an EIT is launching their business idea. The one thing that I do want to mention about the post-release program as well is this idea of the positive community. You know, what we're doing here, regardless of whether or not an EIT decides to pursue a job opportunity or pursue that entrepreneurship route and start a business for themselves, is that we are looking to connect our EITs with those people in the business community and our volunteers. We're looking to make sure that we're creating support for them when they are coming home, so that way we decrease that rate of recidivism. Next slide, please. And here are just a few examples of some of the businesses that we have helped incubate over the years. Some of these businesses, you know, focus on the food industry. So we have some catering businesses here. If you're in the New York area, we have Fresh Taste Bakery. He was actually featured on GMA. His name is, he calls himself Chef Fresh, Antoine Gutierrez, and he makes the most amazing cupcakes. So that's out here in the New York area if you're here. So, you know, thanks, Andrew. So just to talk a little bit about why we do this. We talked about what the program looks like, you know, what the steps are for an EIT to go through our program, whether or not they are going down that career route and getting a job and focusing on employment, or whether they are going down the entrepreneurship pathway and starting their own business. But why do we do the work that we do? So first off, the United States is a nation of mass incarceration. So right now, there are as many people with four-year college degrees as there are that are incarcerated. So just think about that number. Incarceration also disproportionately affects people of color. So more than 60% of people that are in prison today are people of color. But there are only 37% of Americans that are people of color. And a population that is rapidly growing in terms of being incarcerated are women, and people don't actually realize that. So these are just some of the statistics that go along with incarceration. Next slide, please, Andrew. The annual cost of mass incarceration in the United States can just be surprising when you look at that number. It's in the billions. When you think about in terms of the chapters that Defy serves in, the average annual cost to taxpayers is around $77,000 per individual. Whereas for our program, we're looking at about $5,000 to serve somebody that is going through our in-prison program and then moving into our post-release program as well. We talked a little bit about recidivism in the beginning in terms of the impact that we have. When you think about the national numbers, recidivism rate, the return to prison rate after 1 year of release is about 30%. And after 3 years, that means after 3 years of somebody being out, about 50% of those individuals go back to prison. And for Defy graduates, it's less than 8% after 1 year release. Next slide, thank you. So again, we're going to talk a bit about employment and why employment is so important for individuals who are returning home. So those who are returning home that have a criminal conviction are actually, you know, less likely to get a job offer, and that's by 50%. So it cuts their opportunities in half. And that impact is actually doubled for job seekers who are Black as compared to their white counterparts who are coming home who might be also formerly incarcerated themselves. And as we mentioned for Defy, our 3-year employment rate is 84%. And that's compared to our national 3-year average of 73%. Next slide. Thank you. So, you know, let's think about what recidivism means, and let's try to understand what the cycle of recidivism is. So, you know, Andrew mentioned that the ability to get a job and secure you know, a living wage job as well when somebody comes home is actually one of the leading reasons why someone returns to prison and recidivates. So 1 in 3 Americans have a criminal record. When people come home and they're actually applying for jobs, they're scrutinized even more, which leads to them not getting jobs. And when they have a lower employment rate, people actually, they get nervous, they get worried, and they think about going back to doing what they were doing before, and they may recommit offenses. And this is how that cycle of recidivism starts. So why is fair chance hiring so important? What does it lead to? So it leads to economic stability, decreased recidivism, and rebuilding communities. So what does that mean? When somebody gets a job, they're able to now provide for their families, they're able to provide for themselves. So they don't think about going back to doing what they were doing before because they're able to maintain a lifestyle. Again, that decreases recidivism. And in doing that, it also rebuilds communities. So now you have people, parents who are not going back to prison. They're staying within their family. You have people that are giving back to their community as well. So these are just the results of this idea of fair chance hiring. Next slide, please. And, to talk about the social return of the work that we're doing. Here at Defy, ultimately, what we want to do is advance racial and social equity. We want to change this national narrative about the criminal justice system and about those people who are coming home. And we want to make sure that we are increasing economic opportunities for people who are formerly incarcerated. So how are we doing that? I mean, as Andrew mentioned, this idea of shifting mindsets and challenging perceptions is such an important place to start. Educating people about what fair chance hiring is, exactly what we're doing today. This can lead to policy changes in the government as well. Reuniting families and talking about rebuilding communities. And of course, when people come home, they actually don't really have access to seed capital, even if they want to start their business. So providing that opportunity for people to get seed funding is extremely important when we're thinking about the idea of entrepreneurship as well. So what does this all lead to? What is that social return? What it leads to is a decreased cost of incarceration nationally, as well as social services, and it leads to a decrease in crime. When somebody has a job, they pay taxes. And when they have a job, they also create jobs for other people who are formerly incarcerated. Many of our EITs come home, and when they start a business, the first thing they want to do is hire somebody who is formerly incarcerated themselves, somebody maybe that they were incarcerated with, or a fellow EIT that they know, because they understand that this will help break that cycle of recidivism. And then I'll hand it back to Andrew to talk about fair chance hiring.
Great, thanks, Jeanette. So you've heard a lot about the program. You've heard us talk about fair chance hiring. And this is really where the business community comes into play here. So I wanted to start by saying, what do you think? We've talked about fair chance hiring a bunch, sort of generally, but I'm interested to know from all of you out in the audience, what do you think fair chance hiring is? So take 30 seconds to think about it. If you want to share, would love to see anything in the chat. If you could record in chat, just write down, what do you think fair chance hiring is? Just in brief, one sentence. Let's just take 30 seconds for you to, gut, what does it mean to you? All right, let's also ask, let me ask, thank you, yes, good, got some responses coming in. You may be also thinking, fair chance hiring, this sounds a little bit scary. So if you have any fears about fair chance hiring, you can also put those in the, you can also put that in the chat. All right, a couple of things coming in. So someone said they never heard of fair chance hiring before 1 month ago. Yeah, that's pretty common. A lot of people don't even know what it is, haven't heard of it. Giving all prospective applicants a fair chance at employment, sure. Equal opportunity, allowing those folks to explain themselves. Forgiving and allowing people to lead a great life after prison. Leveling the playing field for qualified candidates. All great answers. All right, well, let's jump in. So fair chance hiring, broadly speaking, right? This is a very high level statement. A formal fair chance hiring practice and a workplace culture that celebrates employees who are educated on the issues and fosters a true sense of belonging for fair chance talent. I know that sounds great. It's a lofty statement. Let's find out, let's dig into that a little bit more. All right, so what is fair chance? Fair chance hiring is inclusive hiring practices of people with criminal histories matching skills to job opportunities, assessing the candidate, not the record, and examining criminal histories objectively. It is about creating an intentional process and a company culture, right? Elimination of barriers that exceed what is legally required, and it's also part of a successful diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging plan. Right, so it does not mean you are saying, okay, we're going to hire everybody regardless of conviction, right? And we're not going to consider that at all. It does not mean hiring somebody because they have a criminal history, right? It is not an elimination of standards. It's also not open hiring, which is a little different. Open hiring means you don't background check, you don't look at history at all, and you're just hiring based on the interview. Fair chance hiring differs from that. Fair chance hiring is a background check plus intentional process. And it's also not don't ask, don't tell. So sometimes we'll meet people who's like, well, we don't run background checks, right? And we hire people, but if that company were to find out about that individual, they might have turned them down, or they might actually look for a reason to get rid of them. So don't ask, don't tell also isn't part of company culture, right? Because that means like, we're not going to run a background check, but don't talk about your history here, because it's better that nobody knows, right? So fair chance really gets into this idea of, look, we can recognize as a company, our company culture recognizes that people are redeemable. They may make mistakes, but that if they have shown transformation in their life, if they are looking for that opportunity to succeed, that we're going to give it to them, and we're going to give them that opportunity to re-enter society and to be a full member of society in that way. So in practice, how could fair chance hiring work? Well, so there's something called the nature time nature test, and this really gets into this intentional practice, right? Because so much of fair chance hiring is wrapped up in two places. One is your actual hiring practices, right? What is your HR team doing when somebody comes through the door? You run a background check. What do you do with that information, right? Is it an automatic disqualification? And that actually gets back to this thing of elimination of barriers, right? So you may have legal requirements to say, hey, we work with children. We cannot hire anybody who has an offense relating to children. It's just not legally allowed. Okay, that's fine, right? As a fair chance employer, no one is asking you to violate the law. What we're saying is, though, if you have a workplace that, for example, is processing pet food, right? That person having a history that has nothing to do with processing pet food, or anybody that you're working with, right? You're looking to not establish additional barriers there that might keep them out, that aren't legally required of you to have. And this intentional process comes in, and how do you evaluate that history? So that HR process is one, and the other piece is how your company culture, right? If people are coming into your company and they're scared to death that if anybody finds out about that, they're going to get fired or they're going to get ostracized, right? That's also part of fair chance hiring, is how are you working through that? So this is just one thing that is part of fair chance hiring, nature time, nature test. So what that means is when somebody comes into interview as a fair chance employer, when you learn they have a criminal history, rather than disqualifying them outright, you're willing to dig deeper and to say, okay, let's understand the nature of the conviction history. Let's understand the length of time since the offense, and also what rehabilitative efforts has this person been undertaking since that time? Did they do programming inside? Did they complete a program like Defy? Did they get their college degree? Did they get a certification, right? If they've been out for a little while, right? Are they, how are they doing, right? What are ways in which they're getting involved in their community, or what are their aspirations, right? And then you want to understand the nature of the job. And do the qualifications, are they disqualified on a skills level based on their criminal history or not? So that's part of that process, right? And it's very different than many companies just have a straight up disqualification if somebody pops on a felony background check, or again, they may have we don't perform background checks, but if you find out about it, right, then what would you do with that information if you did find out? And that's important, and that's an intellectual honesty question, right? Okay, we may not ask, but if we found out, would we disqualify them? Because the answer is yes. Then, I think you've got some work to do on the kind of the intentional aspect there. fair chance hiring also doesn't mean, and where Defy comes from is we recognize that like this can be a difficult topic for people, right? There's fear, there's emotion, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to say, we will allow anybody, we'll hire anybody no matter what the offense. What we have discovered in doing this work is many people have a red line where they're like, we would hire people, but only up to a certain place. And I want to tell a story about this. We work with an employer partner here in California, and the CEO came to prison with us to volunteer. Coming out, she said, we would hire people at our company. It was a warehouse job at a clothing company. And we went to go meet with our HR people who were like, kind of, but not really. We wouldn't really do that. So then when they're like, well, what are the offenses? And we said, well, we work with all sorts of kinds of offenses. So then we sent one of our staff people over who was a graduate of our program, and he went to go meet with them. This individual actually had a murder conviction, had served 15 years on a life sentence, had released. He'd now been out a few years. He started a business. He's working for us. You would meet him. You would never know this guy had been incarcerated for 15 years. So he met with them, talked to them, and he disclosed to them, I have a murder conviction. But they had this human interaction where they met Quan. They loved Quan, like, well, we would hire Quan. And so where they landed was, well, we'll hire anybody as long as it's not more than a single murder, which is sort of funny, right? But on the other hand, I think what it really illustrates is a couple things. One is that people have lines in their mind of like, if it's a certain crime, then it's too much, I can't do it. But when you meet somebody, it actually can push that envelope along, and where you can start to think about, well, I met this person and I'm comfortable with them, so maybe I'd be comfortable with other people. So that human aspect is really, really important in thinking about when you're working with people. And the problem with background checks is they so often dehumanize people. And so there's no way to really get past that to say, okay, well, what was the nature of their crime? When did it happen? They were 19. Oh, they had grown up in this area where they were like third generation in a gang. Like, well, of course, this is what happened here, right? So this nature time nature test is part of convening a group within your company to say, we're going to actually look into and ask questions about their history. So fair chance hiring, yes, there's great social impact, right? Reducing bias, but it's increasing recidivism rates, but you're probably also wondering what's in it for me, right? As a company, well, you get a broader talent pool. We have an ongoing labor shortage in this country. I suspect in other places as well, there might be labor shortages as well. And we are leaving aside, right? There's a stat of 70 million people who have criminal histories in our country who can't get jobs, right? So there are millions of people who are qualified out there that are being left behind, talented jobs on the table, who frankly, when they get hired, there are higher employee retention rates. It's also, from a DEI perspective, if you think you've got a DEI program, diversity, equity, inclusion program, and you are not considering criminal histories, all I can say is that if 40% of Black men in this country have a criminal history and you're disqualifying all of them, then how are you good? I don't know how you're going to get there on a diversity and inclusion standpoint. So some common questions here. Are there liabilities? Certainly, if you talk to I encourage all of you to talk to your insurance companies about this. What you'll find, my prediction is that there aren't really any significantly increased liabilities. Look, people are people. You can make hiring decisions and vet people all you want to, and you have a problem, right? You may vet people all you want to and find out they have a history, and you'll probably never have a problem. And what I would say is, particularly people who have longer terms in prison and get out on parole, they had to do a lot of work to be released from prison in order to be released on parole. But fair chance hiring doesn't mean you just hire anybody. You're still conducting a background. You're still conducting an interview with them. You're still trying to get to know them and see if there's a cultural fit. So it's not like it's just like, okay, we're going to forget all that stuff. So our experience is there's not any increased liability to hiring somebody who's formerly incarcerated. It's certainly not more than anybody else you would hire. How do you socialize the idea? This is something that we can help with. You have to think about your company culture. Who are the people? How do you bring this idea? How do you give people an opportunity to voice their fears, right? And recognize, like, yeah, listen, I understand you have fears. Let's have some interaction here. Steps to be taken to build a fair chance hiring plan. First thing I'd say is start to consider it with your leadership team, right? You can include other people who might be in leadership at different levels of the company. But you want to bring people together to have a conversation about it, to understand what is fair chance hiring, what isn't it, how do we surface some of our preconceived notions, and start to address them, right, in these person-to-person interactions. And who should be involved? Everybody, right? So I'd say you can start with your leadership teams, having some HR, if you have a legal team, marketing, whatever it is, but people have got to come together around this. And then when your leadership team, and we've done cross-sectional workshops with people from leadership all the way down, but you want to bring in people who are leaders in your company, again, whether they are leaders at line staff level, medium level, top level, and start to build some support for the idea. And you start to take a temperature test. And then as a company, right, you start to develop this intentional plan, and then you're going to roll it out there and say, this is what we're doing, right? And then you start to deal with it along the way. But it's, there are other things to understand, which we don't have to get into today, but, if somebody's on parole, what does that mean for you? How do you work with people? Are there supports you might need to put in place? Maybe, maybe not. And see where that goes. So we can help, let us know. We're happy to help in a bunch of different ways, whether it's workshops or, we have volunteer engagement opportunities for people in the states that we work in that help really kind of humanize this issue. But there are questions coming, I know, and I think we're going to come back to those questions after Stuart has a little talk. So I'm going to stop there and hand it over to Stuart.
Thank you so much, Andrew and Jeanette. I am blown away that the statistic around that there's as many people in prison that have 4-year degrees. It's just, my brain is melted a little bit. So I want to invite Stuart Shanley to join the conversation. Stuart is the CEO of Earth Animal, which is an amazing icon member of the Pet Sustainability Coalition. And he's going to be talking to us about, how has this meant on his journey and with Earth Animal. So Stuart, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invite.
I'm so excited to hear about how you got involved with Defy Ventures and what has this movement meant for you?
Yeah, sure thing. So thanks everyone for taking the time. I'm just going to talk for about 10 minutes, no slides, just as somebody who has been involved with Defy in various different ways over the last 2 years. And I guess I speak to you today as somebody who has been personally involved in coaching and mentoring entrepreneurs in training through the boot camp and accelerator program, and also as CEO of Earth Animal, who's a company who is interested in becoming a much more diverse, equitable and inclusive employer, and overall as a talent brand than we do at the moment, and really is just starting to dip its toe into the water as a fair chance employer. And I think my relationship with Defy actually started almost 2 years ago now, and started with two, if I'm being honest, two relatively disappointing misfires. In that the first one was I got invited by a really good friend of mine to a prison visit to hear some EIT trainings, and because of conflict reasons I had to pull out, so it was sort of something that I committed to do but wasn't able to follow through on. Second to that is that in 2019 we were offered to interview a Defy graduate, and myself and Elizabeth Wade, our head of people, interviewed that person, and they were absolutely fabulous. I mean, literally, in terms of what Andrew was saying about qualified for the job, the best candidate that I'd met in the entire process. And I went immediately into, I believe in second chances. I want to employ talent for who they are and what they bring to the organisation in the future. And for me, it wasn't even up for debate. And the however part is, even as chief exec of the organisation, I was unable to create the levels of influence, persuasion, and ultimately decision making to get the business to support the hiring of that person. So we didn't actually end up following through. And that was our story in 2019. If we fast forward to 2020, I think one of the triggers to sort of part two of our involvement, and my involvement with Defy was COVID. I think when I get a second, I might write a little coffee book that says one of the good things about COVID is ... Get everybody to contribute. But you know, when COVID hit in March, and you know, me as chief exec essentially sent everybody home, I started to wonder what you know, my job was, and how the company should be around it. And very quickly got into, you know, my role as a leader was about giving people clarity and confidence when worry and confusion were everywhere. And you know, I think we really quickly got into this thing around focusing on positivity, productivity, connectivity, and keeping everyone safe. And we got into that groove really, really quickly. And then something else happened. You know, you guys will all remember this, the tragic passing of George Floyd in May, you know, only 2 months after into that pandemic. And, you know, what started in the world as you know, a reaction to, you know, a negative reaction to what people saw was a really, really terrible police brutality, grew into something else, which was, you know, a sort of society, for me anyway, it's a sort of societal uprising against human beings of all kinds, right? And you know, that one was pretty hard actually for me personally to deal with, and also for our company. And you know, it's a company called Earth Animal who believes in, you know, its companies are about, you know, sustainability and integrity. What does, you know, how should you be as a leader and as a company in that kind of environment? And I have to say, it took us a little while to get our head around how, you know, how we should react and be on this. And we started with some really simple moves. We have a 1% promise in our company where we dedicate 1% of our net sales to, you know, organisations and mission-driven efforts that preserve and enhance the quality of life for animals and the earth. And so we were quick to divert that promise to some really, really good organisations. So we put some into Policy Link and Equal Justice Initiative and an organisation called Catal Centre, and they're all great social justice movements in our view. But you know, diverting our 1% just didn't feel enough for us. And you guys will all remember this as well, is that loads of companies, when the George Floyd incident happened, were forced to work out what their position was on it at pace. And the ones that I think did really, really badly were the ones that just floated out lofty words from the top of social media posts. And they got called out very, very quickly. And the best ones were the ones that looked in the mirror and said, look, we have a responsibility to do more, to civically contribute. And that's where we got to, is that we needed everybody to do more. So what we did is we went to a 4-day week at Earth Animal, and we didn't give everybody a day off. We gave them a day on. We called it a day on, where people should go out and do things that were important to them, of value, for which they received no pay. And that was the trigger that reactivated myself back to re-engage with Defy. I started working with this organisation called Person to Person as my first iteration of Day On, and they helped local families who didn't have enough resources to clothe and feed their family. And I helped out. I was actually a fashion consultant for them, but that wasn't quite enough for me. So I got re-involved in Defy, and I met Jeanette, and Jeanette took some time to just do a presentation a bit like the one that you've seen, with a bit more detail on the ways in which I could get involved. And I started working with entrepreneurs in training, you know, hearing people pitching, consulting. I took on a personal coaching assignment, and I'm still a coach of that person who's running starting to build a B2B business called Trident, we specialise in, I've got to do the plug, we specialise in VoIP, e-payments and cost reduction strategies. So if anyone wants any help in that, let me know. I'll arrange a pitch for Ed to come and show you his stuff. But here's the first conclusion about the benefits to this as an individual. So I have to say that personally, having worked in the coaching and EIT program for 9 months, the value exchange for me, for as a CEO, I got more out of it than I feel like I've given to those mentees. And Andrew was talking about a talent pool earlier, and we're a fast-growing company, and I have to say that everybody that I've met in that program, the work ethic they have, the gratitude that they have for the help that is given to them, the active listening that they do when you give them feedback, and their desire for self-improvement is something that's just really a sort of joy to behold, if you know what I mean, and something that we would all want, I think, in all of our workforces. And it was involvement in that EIT program that, as part of one of those networking sessions, just the concept of fair chance employment workshops was tabled. And because of my personal experience of mentoring, I was very quick to jump on it, because we as a company at the same time were struggling with where to start actually in what DEI would mean to us, and how do we become a more equitable employer. And actually we were a little bit scared, it was a little bit, we felt like we didn't know enough about it. We were scared we might scrape our knees. We were scared we might make a mistake. We were scared we didn't know the vernacular well enough to engage in it. So engaging with a fair chance workshop felt like a good first step for us. And I have to say, having attended that workshop, we ran that workshop with just our senior leadership to start with. And I have to say that I think it was a fantastic move for us in just starting to put principles into practice. And that sort of rounds out my chat, really, is that I think most of us on this call, from a principles perspective, we'd say, yeah, we believe in second chances. We're open-minded, progressive. And that's okay. But where it matters is how you put progress and principles into practice, because that's where progress and change happens. And I have to say that the workshop did a great job for us at transforming how people's brains were wired up in our leadership team about this topic, overcoming the fear related to it, or the uncertainty, or the insecurities, reticence, lack of knowledge. It just helped us on our journey, and we're committed to moving in that direction. We haven't, in full disclosure, we haven't hired anybody yet, but I don't believe that situation is going to stay true for very long, and we're definitely committed to working with the guys in the future in getting better and better at this. So that's really my story, is that from the two, let's say ways in which I got involved with Defy, both personally as a coach and introducing the Fair Chance workshop to our company. It's like the company one became a company artifact. It actually made our people feel more positive, more engaged, more good about Earth Animal and where it's going. And I've certainly got a ton out of the personal coaching thing. So, and it's just, from a selfish perspective, it's helped me and my company accelerate our improvement trajectory in this area. So, I'm sort of, big advocate, which is why I agreed to sort of tail the presentation today. And I think that's all I had to say, Melissa. So if anyone's got any questions, I'm here too.
Yes, absolutely, Stuart. Thank you for that powerful message and being willing to talk about not only the successes, but also some of the struggles as well. So we're now going to open it up to questions. If you've got any, please put those in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. But one already came in that I really love for Andrew and Jeanette, and that was if somebody on this webinar is like, I'm all in, let's do it, let's great, I'm going to be fair chance, we're going to do all the things. How would you recommend them talking about that? Is there a way that they should be marking that? Should they be including that in job descriptions, or what's the next step in that journey?
Yeah, so you can a couple ways you can note yourself as a fair chance employer. Certainly in your job descriptions, right? When you put out a position description saying at the bottom, we are a fair chance employer, is one way to do it. There are pledges you can sign. Even I think on LinkedIn, if you advertise positions on LinkedIn, I believe there's a fair chance hiring badge that you can apply to your position. I think anytime you are putting on any of those job boards, there are ways to say we are a fair chance employer. And certainly on your career pages, you would want to say you're a fair chance employer. And then I think also, if you're going down that road, it's helpful to have a couple of partners out there that are helping to feed potential candidates to you, and also can operate as a support to you. So one of the nice things about having a partner is that when you hire somebody on, right, then you have a partner to help you if that person does need some additional support. So there are different ways to do it. SHRM, something called Getting Talent Back to Work, I can put them in the chat. They have some additional stuff on this that I can share with everybody. It talks more about that. There's also a fair chance hiring pledge you can take.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. Stuart, I love this question that just came in for you. So as you were having those conversations with your fellow members of the leadership team and trying to push in this direction, was there a particular argument that felt most compelling? Was it, this is just the right thing to do, or look, there's economic benefits, or how did you approach that?
Yeah, so I think there's two things that have come out of this for our team. Is that and I won't spoil it for everyone, but the way in which the workshop is done, there's it's like a brilliant thriller, right? So there's like a twist in the tale, and it is, and as a result of that, it is monumentally successful at rewiring people's brains about what this thing's really all about. And Andrew mentioned it earlier. It's like ultimately it's about human beings, right? And often the recruitment process dehumanizes the process, and once you sort of rehumanize it, then it just transforms the playing field. There's another couple of things that I talk about a lot, right, in our business, and we're obviously a high growth company and very ambitious to make an impact in the sector. And my personal story is quite interesting, right? Because I came, this is sounds a bit weird way of saying it, but I came to PET quite late in life, right? I've only been working in the pet industry like 3 or 4 years, and I never considered it. And in the pet industry, we actually do have a talent awareness issue. If we want to be an amazing industry, our talent pool reach needs to be better than it is at the moment. We need to attract more diversity, more good people from all areas of this earth. And so this is an important part of this. And our pet is just such a well-kept secret, right? The talent. And that's a good thing for the folks that are in it, right? But it's also a bad thing in terms of like really pushing the industry forward, because it is higher levels of talent and greater diversity of opinion and input and creativity and experiences that will really drive it forward. So that one's landed really, really well. And I think the other one is, which I think we've, and again, this is a very important point that Andrew said, is that, and I think it probably could be reinforced here, is that it is, he talked about this red line, and although this is like intellectually, this is such a flawed argument, right? Because either you believe that if somebody commits an offence, pays their time for it, and then they should come out with a clean sheet because they've had their punishment. It shouldn't impact anything at all, right? Because you should believe that it wasn't our job to decide whether we should repunish them, right, by not considering them. It's like they've already had it. So, but the reality is that everybody's got their red line, right? And that means the type of previously incarcerated people and the gravity of what they've done in the past is that everyone's got one. I actually have one as well, and I'm probably one of the most open at least in our company. And so my thing is like, don't go there straight away, right? Start somewhere, and that's what I think DEI is all about. So many people don't do anything at all because it's just a scary topic for them, and it's like, and all the data is like, whether you see this stuff, it doesn't need me to pitch it, is that all the data says that the more diverse a workforce is, the more valuable the company is. It's like, there's so many different stats of the same thing that broadly say the same thing. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's a good idea because it should be appealing to us as people. That's one of the things about the pet industry. We're all really nice, aren't we? But it should also appeal to us commercially. And it's like, when you've got, when it's the right thing to do, and it's also an economically right thing to do, it's like, it's a home run in my book, right? So, and I think our leadership team have now got their head around that, and I think we're in a different place than we were, like, say, 24 months ago, to the point where if the event that happened 2 years ago happened again, I think there'd be a different outcome.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Jeanette. So for everyone's reference, we're going to get information about the workshop that will be available to all of our PSC members. We also hope that you will join us next month for our next webinar. We're going to change topics just a little bit, but we're going to be talking about the increased consumer interest in climate change and carbon footprinting with both the WSP, who helped write the greenhouse gas accounting protocol, and Open Farm, who has started this journey of doing a complete carbon footprint on their entire operations and reporting that to consumers. So we'd appreciate it if you drop us a quick line on the poll to just tell us how you enjoyed today's webinar. And thank you so much for attending. And thank you so much to Jeanette and